You're listening to the Property Heroes podcast and Fantastic Services, the place where we talk openly with architects, developers, investors, designers, and coaches who help make properties sell faster and at a higher price. In this episode, you're joined by Nicole Bremner, best-selling author of Bricking It. Hello, Nicole. It's really nice to finally have you on the podcast. We've been scheduling it for a while. We're both busy on this stuff here, so it's really interesting to hear. So, Nicole, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and your background in property?
Sure. I started over 10 years ago now in property. And prior to that, I was in banking. I worked for large financial institutions like Capital Asset Management and also Goldman Sachs, both in London or in Sydney, London, and New York most recently. And then it was around 2009. I had my second child, and I was looking for something that I could do around the children that helped me just channel some of my creativity as well as my investment knowledge. And I renovated a house, loved the process, renovated a flat, loved the process. And it's then that my partner said to me, "You're really good at this and you're still talking with your builders. So why don't you look at doing this full time?" And that's when I started. And I was very lucky to start in Hackney in East London at a time when Hackney was really thriving. So I was very, very lucky. So since then, I started converting HMOs into luxury family homes at a time when that really worked as a strategy. And now I've built that up over the last 10 years, and I'm just completing around 109 units across 7 sites, I think, across London.
So, I mean, this is very interesting because you don't come from the traditional background of builders. And I don't think anybody in property actually comes from that background. I mean, it's always been like some people fall into it. And of course, some people really fall into it and then fail miserably with it. I mean, if you were to say one thing that describes it, what do you think has been the success of your ability to continue with it? Because it's never an easy journey and there's a lot of risk to be taken, right?
Yeah, I think it's your ability to rebound from those setbacks that inevitably will occur, because anyone who's been in property long term will know that it's a series of setbacks. It is cyclical in nature, it is high risk, as you pointed out. And it's not just all plain sailing. There are market conditions, there are financial valuations to deal with, there are supplier issues, and there are contractor issues. There are just, you never know what you're going to uncover when you start building out a project. There's just so much uncertainty with it.
I mean, let's take an example. I mean, it's like it's in your book. You're very detailed in about how to start out, right? Because it's like you've got to take this step by step. So if you were, because that's a little while ago. I mean, 2009. We know what Hackney was like back then. We know what Zone One was like. We know that, you know, Zone Two, Zone Three. We know the ripple effect of this stuff. We all know what happened since 2009 and how properties went up. What would you say now if you're starting now? Where would be a good place to start? And I'm not asking for the advice, but I'm like or a postcode that's going to be three times the value. I'm just more asking about the mentality and the steps.
Yeah, first of all, it's strategy, and you need to consider your personal circumstances and what strategy will work for you based on that. Because when I first started, for me, it was all about flips, buying, renovating, and selling. And the reason for that was that I didn't need any income at that time. Just needed capital growth. I wanted to have my assets work for me and continually be turned over. So that was the strategy then. Now I would prefer income to having my assets work, because I've got so much invested in property long term right now. I need income producing assets and investments, not just property, but anything that's income producing. It could be that people have very, very little time. So doing a holiday let business or a short let business is just not, that's not the right strategy. Again, HMOs are incredibly administrative. And so, again, it's not for people if they haven't got much time. And also, it comes down to what your knowledge is and whether or not you've got a trusted team around you who can take on the various development tasks if you choose to go down the development route. Because it's, again, not for the faint hearted. And there are unfortunately a lot of people out there who are unscrupulous, and it's just not for the faint hearted.
I mean, it's
But yeah,
really
to answer your question, it's on strategy. What is your strategy? What do you need from it?
exactly. So the strategy starts with you. Like, what is your need for property? Is it an extra income, or is it your only income, or are you looking at income, or are you looking at investing for a longer term flip? Okay, so that's to me seems like the three easy step. And then you know, in this case here, let's say that the person is looking at getting income, right? Because that's what you said you're looking for, because you've done the flips, you bought them at 30 and sold them at 100, or whatever you've done in multipliers. What's the best way to generate income?
Well, it's going to be through tenants, having good quality tenants in a property. And I would say long term. So, like right now, what I'm looking at are council tenants in flats because councils are desperate for stock. They're paying quite well, actually, not quite market rates, but they'll pre-rent, they'll pre-agree a letting term for say 2 years. They'll give you a nice little incentive for signing up to the scheme. And actually, you're doing something good because even though on a say, one flat, for example, I've been getting 2,500 a month for. I'm now looking to rent that to the local authority for 1,900 a month. Now the market's dropped, so I probably would only get say 2,200. So I'm foregoing around 300 a month. However, they're also giving me quite a generous sign-up bonus, and that has to also be factored into that. And it's completely hands off for me. I do not have to worry about voids. I don't have to worry about maintenance, cleaning. All of that is done for me by the council. All I have to worry about is if something major happens, and that what will I do after 2 years when the council either decides to roll over or not. So for me, that's really working well. The other thing that might work is I think what we're going to see a lot of going forward is developers who haven't been able to sell the last bits of their development. So it's about perhaps if people have got cash, investing in new builds that might be the ones that don't quite meet help to buy. So they're perhaps so up to 600,000 is help to buy. So anything over 600 uh, maybe is not selling. So you can go to developers, buy a package of those at a discount. And again, the yields are very good. And the yields used to be quite good on 3 bedrooms because they were very easy to rent out to professionals. Now I'm not sure how that's going to be. But again, even though demand has slowed somewhat, there still is demand for rental properties.
Well, Nicole, I don't know if you've seen the same. I mean, in Fantastic Services, our removals things have seen that it's a lot of people moving from a 2 bit to a 3 bit, but it's not because they're adding another, it's not because of another child, it's because they're doing a second office or they're doing it in a home office. So we've seen a lot of that. And we've also seen the redecoration of this stuff here. And we've seen people move several miles outside of London because that gives them a garden, it gives them gives them a place to put the office. Some people are having their garden already, but they're putting a container office in there, and we're seeing more demand for that, which I think, you know, given the circumstances, is what it is. So it's like we can't really predict that, but that's what other on the podcast have also talked about this change. Let's take back to something more. Let's take some more back to something more like the early days, right? Because now you know, I've dabbled a little bit in property. I'm by no means an expert in any way, and I don't claim to be one. You know, we are a service company first and foremost. So it's like I want to talk to something that maybe is very common. Is like, what was your first sort of real disaster that happened, and how did you overcome it? Mm. If you're okay with
Oh
sharing
dear. There have just been so many, and just to pick one, I've had a drunk builder go through a floor and then through a ceiling and then through a floor and end up on the ground. Luckily, he was fine. I had another. This is on my very first development, which was my home actually. I had the electrician slip over in the back garden, land on a stake in the garden. It went through his lung, punctured a lung. He then went to hospital and they said, well, it's really lucky you came in because you've got lung cancer and you wouldn't have known. So now we can treat you. So that was terrible. What else have I had done? I had, there are a lot of examples of planning issues. And I think this is something that faces a lot of property developers. So just planning taking far longer than it should. We had one particular development on City Road where the planning took 2 years. And when the local authority responded to our initial planning application, they actually responded on the previous application. They didn't even respond on ours, so they got it completely wrong. They responded and rejected a previous application that had also been rejected. We then appealed and said, "You guys have got it completely wrong. This is not even the right application." And they just sort of said, "Tough, appeal." So we appealed, and then you have to go through the inspectorate, and it's just a huge process that cost 2 years. And we thought we'd be in and out of that project in 2 years. We didn't ever budget for 2 years worth of additional interest
Mm.
plus that. So that's another issue, is down valuations. So we bought a property in West London for lots of money. It was valued at a lot more money. And in the end, because property prices have plummeted so much over the last 4 years within the luxury sector, it's just not worth anywhere near what we forecast it to be. Property prices really have come down over the last couple of years, and that's been an absolute disaster.
And that's opposite to what's being sort of told in the news. I mean, Nicole, I know we often have discussion about this stuff, is that what's going on in the news is not what goes on in the real world. I mean, you and me often have that because, like, I'll post you something, and you're like, but that's not how it is. So I mean, that's another thing. It's like it seems to me like either that PR story is coming out of these state agents of, oh, it's going up and this stuff here, and then yes, oh well, I will buy anyway. So what's your advice on that? Should we listen to the news? Should we listen to what should we listen to? I mean, people like yourself, Nicole, what should we listen to know what's going on, right? I mean,
Look, in any market, no matter what it is, whether it's cryptocurrency, whether it's if the stock market, whether it's the housing market, we have a herd mentality. When we see on the news that property prices are going up, Bitcoin's going up, stocks are going up, what do? We jump in. We are lemmings. We don't question what's going on. So with house prices, yes, they're going up. They're going up from a very, very low base. Why are they going up? Because of stamp duty reprieve. But what's happening is people are paying more than the saving they'd have from the stamp duty. So because the property prices, the house prices are going up, people think, oh no, I better quickly jump in, save myself stamp duty. What I think actually is going to happen is we're going to have a huge crash, because you think about it, if we're going into this period of economic uncertainty where people are losing their jobs, we've got lockdown extended, how on earth are we going to support these inflated house prices and this volume of transactions going forward? It's unsustainable. I think we're in for a good 18 months from now, really, of pain while the market sort of calms down and resettles, and then we'll see a new starting point in about I'd say 22.
so I mean, as I said, like, well, in most cases we can't predict this, right? I think your advice is whatever it is on the basis of it, Nicole. But I'm more thinking about, like, how do I find out something that's more real? Like, I know you also have you're also involved with an auction site. Is auctions a good place to go now? I mean,
Again, there's just a lot of hysteria around auctions because people get online or get in that room. It's kind of like eBay. When you're bidding on something on eBay, you do not want to get beaten. You want that pair of trainers, whatever it is.
mm,
You want to get them no matter what. And the same thing happens with auctions. And yes, the auction company I'm involved in is doing incredibly well because it's online auctions,
mm,
but they're seeing the same thing, that people bid up, bid up, bid up because of this hysteria in the market. Look, there are some really good indices, but I would suggest that you try and read between the lines in the indices. And it all depends on whether you're buying as a family home or whether you're buying as an investment. If you're buying as a home, this is a purely emotional decision, and it should be an emotional decision. But if you're buying as an investment, then you have to completely strip all emotion out of it and think, is this the very best purchase? And is this the best way of making my money work for me at this time?
mm. I think you're absolutely right. This thing about compartmentalization, or putting it in a box, is like, this is my home. I want the kitchen to be this and that. Don't think about what it is you're selling in the long term. I mean, at the end of the day, that versus paying rent should be okay, but it's not an investment. It's not that's going to give you 10, 20. Plus, remember, you also have to live there. I mean, and one of the things that we see as well, I mean, and which is one of the reasons I do what I do with Fantastic Services, is we try to make a home, right? It's a nice place to be. So it's a different story from, say, like an after builders cleanup, like just finish this, put those colors on, and bam, you go. And then you realize that as a livable stuff, it's not necessarily the best place, right? You've got the radiators, you've got that kind of heating. The underfloor heating is not in those places where, I mean, so it's also what you invest in it, because nothing beats having an amazing home, right? I mean, nothing beats having a place where you just really feel at home versus something that you're selling or renting out. So it's also two different things you're putting into it. So I think that, like what is the purpose of this? I mean, like, start with the strategy. What are you trying to achieve here? Are you trying to achieve rental income and so forth? So I think that's it. And is that something you describe more in your book? Um,
Yeah, definitely. And something I'd like to add to that is that your home is the most tax effective investment you can have because there's no capital gains tax on your home. Property is actually a very inefficient or tax inefficient investment. You get taxed on the entry, you get taxed on the exit. If you pass away and own property, you get taxed on that as well. Obviously, you do your home with inheritance tax as well, but property is a very tax ineffective investment. So that needs to be considered. But your home is not. And you can borrow a lot against your home, which again makes it quite an interesting investment stroke lifestyle. But I think now we are living more and more in our homes. It's even more important to make sure that we are creating beautiful homes. And that's don't save the best for best. Just enjoy having someone like Fantastic Services come in and do a good clean for you regularly and have this beautiful space that really is an oasis, because we are spending so much more time in our homes right now that it should be a place that we do find some tranquility and peace, and with all this craziness going around us. So I wouldn't scrimp on your home, and I wouldn't put it wait for the right time to renovate your kitchen or make some various changes. Do it now and just enjoy that whole
hmm.
your home.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, but it's like, always it's like we were waiting for, oh well, when I get to the next pay bracket, that's when I'm going to buy my property and so forth. I mean, and I think that getting on the ladder, a lot of people think like, well, I'm waiting for that so I can afford buying that one bed in London or that two bed. I'm waiting for that so I have the deposit. I mean, and everything else. And I think that one of the things that I've always found is that location has always been what makes it go up in value most. But the real value is having a home. And it's not necessary. You don't have to be mortgaged. If you buy it the right place. And I think that this new world, what we're looking at is like location potentially is less important. What would you say? I mean, location's always been very important, but do you think that this new thing that's happening, do you think location has been less important now?
Absolutely. I think we're all realizing that what is more important than the locality of where we live is what there is around what we live,
Hmm.
where we live. So it's not about the commutability to work anymore, because most people aren't going, well, a lot of people are not commuting into work anymore. They're commuting like this via screens. So for me, during the first lockdown, I went and stayed out at my partner's house, and he lives in the countryside. And for us, it was like lockdown wasn't even there because we had the woods around the house. It was quiet. It was tranquil. It was just such a peaceful experience. The pubs weren't open, which was terrible, but apart from that, and I just really felt for my friends who were in central London and in apartment buildings. And
Mm.
I've got one friend in New York who's got 3 children in a 2 bedroom house, a flat, sorry. And these are and yes, it's convenient because her partner and her work in central New York, but that's just not lifestyle. So now I think it's more about finding a locality that can meet your lifestyle, somewhere that is perhaps by the sea or in by some woods or woodlands, and being commutable and having various amenities around you is less important.
So you think, I mean, whether the lockdown goes on and on, or whether you're going to have multiple cycles, I think that besides the sea thing we don't talk about, but besides that, do you think that's a trend that's coming here to stay? Not just because of this, but a trend that's coming, like, we want to live in a better environment. Do you think that's a long-term thing? Because, I mean, like, then it's very clear the investment should be outside of the central part, or maybe that's a pied-à-terre you have in London, which is a studio, which is just about enough to make you a coffee that you maybe share with three others. I mean, like I used
Yeah.
to have that in London, which was amazing, and I was there for 1 week. My business partner was there, and amazing place. Like tiny. It was a bedroom, then one corridor, and then in the corridor was the kitchen, and then the bathroom on the other side, and that was it. You
It's
know,
a hotel room, isn't it? And it has
yeah,
to be treated as such. It's a self-contained hotel room. Yeah, perhaps that is the way. And I think that probably what's happening is families are going to move out of central London. And perhaps then the younger people who want more of the metropolitan lifestyle will be able to afford to move in. So I think we'll probably see this shift. But I do feel that for families, I know for myself, I moved out of London 12 months ago now to the month. And it has just made such a difference to my family not having to have that whole competition for schools. Competition for schools is awful in the UK, or in central London anyway. I'm not sure about the other city centres, but competition for schools. I was facing three children at three different schools. I moved them outside, 35 minutes on a fast train outside of London. I've got them all in one beautiful school that looks like something out of Harry Potter, and they're there until they finish their A levels. So to me, it came down to lifestyle. I don't necessarily like living here, but what I really do enjoy is being in a quieter, more rural type setting. But I miss my friends in London, obviously, but I can't see them anyway. Even if I was in London, couldn't see them.
and obviously, like what we've seen is, like, now we're growing our franchisees, is like, do you have access to all the commodities, like, you have your daily cleaner, you have your gardening, your mowing and the stuff here. I mean, we've seen more and more openings for franchise in rural areas where, like, listen, I do need my carpet cleaned. I'm demanding the same expectation that I had in central London. I'm demanding that, maybe not on the same regular basis, but that's this. Do you have all the amenities? I mean, like, we used to deliver Rue or Uber Eats. You press the button and you had food delivered. I mean, are all those things out there, or is it coming?
Deliveroo is not,
Yeah,
Uber Eats is not. There's no Ubers here. You cannot get. There's no Uber. I'm in Medway, and there's no Uber permitted in the area. So
yeah.
no taxis. I walk or drive, which I find incredibly annoying. But fantastic services are out here, and I have you, as you know, I've used your services before. Your removals team, I cannot praise them highly enough. They were just exceptional. I probably underbooked them, and they worked through the night until they were done. They just could not have been better, and I will
Well,
certainly recommend them.
well, I think also your expectations, because you're in property. It was like, it was a two-bedroom you booked, and that was a very, very large two-bedroom, no, three-bedroom,
Yeah, no, there was some
enormous.
communication issues, but you
Yeah,
resolved them
yeah.
instantly, and we got there at the end, and they worked tirelessly. So, and got
But
me moved into this.
Nicole, going back to this stuff here, it's like you know, looking back at the 10 years ago. I mean, like, obviously you've had a good number of. I mean, I never like using the word luck, right? But you've had a good success in property. You've had a good, and not only that, you really enjoy it, right? So it's like, and that's one of the things. It's like, I always think that it's more about that, and then also getting a financial results from that. It's more about being able to do that and then getting a financial income than this. I mean, a lot of people will be striving just to get that return on it, and I think that makes a difference, because we all know that there are certain ways of doing property that will be even more profitable, which frankly doesn't suit anyone, right? But going
Yeah.
back to that stuff here, like, if you could tell yourself 10 years ago when you started the journey, right? Because this is about people who are, there are people who are very, very far in the journey who's going to be listening to this, and there's people who are like, they haven't never signed a mortgage and they don't know where to start. If you go back 10 years ago, just when you put your first toe in the water here, what would you tell yourself now after 10 years of experience, a decade on from that? Which, funny enough, was also about the same recession, and we'll probably talk about that. But
Yeah, it was. And talking about luck, I think I was lucky. I got started in property coming out of the the global financial crisis. And so I was able to ride that wave up, and I got incredibly lucky with location, being in Hackney. During 2003, 4, 5, you could buy unrenovated property for more than renovated because everyone wanted to be a developer and develop property in Hackney. So I got very lucky with my location, and that was pure luck. But as far as a lesson to myself 10 years ago, and the one thing that I'd want to impart to others, that is go slow. It is better to it's that there's that alcohol awareness ad that I always think of, which is it's better to arrive and survive. Do you know what I mean? It's better. The road is littered with developers who attempt to ride up this wave really, really quickly. They borrow lots of money. They take on lots of investors. They take on too many projects. And my goodness, it's a tough, tough journey. And if you do that, you will crash and burn. It really is a marathon, not a sprint, to use another one. But just take it slowly. It doesn't matter if you're 25, 35, 45, 55, you've still got a lot of time left to enjoy the process, and just go slowly and make sure you arrive.
There's a big difference in the advice. I mean, it's like, obviously, I'm an entrepreneur myself, and my company's grown with 300 and something up percent a couple of years, and we took a little bit more time the last couple of years in order to get the processes right. And it's actually been better when we slowed down in order to move faster, right? So it's like, so I understand that
Interesting.
thing, but it's also like if you're thinking about the leverage of it. I mean, if you have 25, 30 properties out there, there's all leverages. It just takes one little part of the domino, and then two of them don't come through, bam, right?
Yeah.
It goes fast if you leverage on upon leverage upon leverage. And I think that we often have this breakneck speed of growing anything. It's also because that's what we're pumped with, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's like, but it's funny you talk about that developer stuff, because it's like, it seemed to me like, a couple of years ago, at least TV was littered with this thing. It was like, where people watching paint dry, right? It's just because the colors and the stuff here. I mean, you know, but you can do that at home, right? What I've always said is, like, you can always decorate your living room again, right? That's like if you don't, why invest in, why invest in the whole property, go through the whole chain of that just because you actually just want to change color in your room. That's one of the things I've always said, like, okay, well, there's a financial gain by selling the property again, but sometimes, there's more of a mental gain in it. So, but Nicole, it's so going back those 10 years, I mean, there's like, what are you most proud of having achieved during those 10 years? I mean, because I've seen some of your properties, they're incredible. Or at least that's the ones you show. I don't know whether there's other things, but I've seen some of your stuff, and it's incredible. What are you most proud of? What's your
I think I'm most proud of the properties that I did in the early years. They're the ones that I did completely on my own. I had the final say on everything. I did them all completely myself, and there are around 8 of them, or 8 different projects that I did completely on my own, maybe with a couple of investors. And I'm so proud that we did invest in property at a time in Hackney, at a time when it was going through a huge change. So now, at any time, I can walk through Hackney and say, I did that property, I did that property, I did that property. And they're beautiful. And they were all homes that I would have been happy to live in myself. And I'm just really, really proud of the small part that I had to play in the rejuvenation of Hackney. Some people think that that's a terrible thing, and Hackney is gentrified and gentrification is bad, but I'm proud of the small part that I played in
Well, 20 years ago, I lived in Brixton, so I was always
that.
the same thing. That was where the only
Yeah.
thing I could afford as a student to live. So, I had gunshots every second night. But that's what it is.
Mm,
It's London, right? So we have
yeah.
different areas. It's gonna change, and it goes back and forth. So I think that's the way. Nicole, I mean, and if you were starting anew, I mean, since you said take it slow, that's what I summarized. Take it slow, enjoy the process, go through this. We're going to see a recession. You say there's going to be a potential crash. We're all predicting a crash, which means that it's going to be self-fulfilling prophecy. How big is
Hmm.
the crash going to be? Because last time when there was a crash, it was what I was like, oh, I'm not going to buy because there's a crash. So I was really scared about going into that as my own. I was like, and I missed out massively because, oh, there's going to be a crash. And turned out the crash was 8%. I was like, well, I could have lived that through that if I'm thinking long term, right? It's hard if you're leverage upon leverage upon leverage upon leverage, then then the bank comes in and lower your mortgage rates. I'm like, okay, you know, basically I would have been better off staying, you know. So
Yeah, that's right, staying in.
so it's like,
I think I could give you actual numbers. So I know from talking to estate agents and lettings agents that the rental market is down between 15 and 20% now. And I know because I'm selling so many units right now, I can tell you that we on one occasion have accepted a 20% drop in an asking price on one particular flat and are regularly accepting 10% discounts to asking. So I can tell you that, and I know I'm not the only one. I know that other developers are having to do that as well. And this is mainly because anything above that 600,000 mark. So if you've got something for say 6,857, if you want to sell it to someone for help to buy, you have to sell it for 600. There's no getting around that. So there's as for how much further it will drop, I think we could see up to a 30% drop from peak, but it's about when you calculate that peak, because if you look at
exactly,
2000
but that
and
peak might be 20% off, so that actually only means a 10% drop, which means that you're
absolutely.
still getting your money back, but you're not getting a 30% profit on it, but you're just, so it's like,
I've got one particular flat that fell through three times in 2017 for sale at around 620, 610, 68,
mm,
608. So it fell through three times. And in the end, I just said, forget it. I'm not going to sell it now. I'll rent it out. Rented it out for 3 years, had great tenants. Went to put it back on the market now, and the agents valued it at asking of 570. And so that's what we're seeing again, because there's so much help to buy new build stock that's come onto the market, because people were buying projects in around 2017, and now they're finished and they've come onto the market. We're seeing
mm,
so much stock come on that anything that's older stock, secondhand stock, is taking a beating.
yeah. No, but it's a hard one to say. It's like if you're buying a house with the house to buy, I mean, it's like I spent a lot of years without being on the property ladder on purpose, because it was like I always had that different things. We're not going to go into that stuff. We can go into renting versus this stuff here for a long time. I wanted to live in Zone 1 back then, and it was like there's no way that I could even buy that stuff, and it was impossible. It was pointless for it, stuff like that. But so you're saying, and whereas I knew that investment was easier outside, and I did that in order to get on the ladder. So it's like I think um, we're talking about suppliers and builders, right? Talking about suppliers, builders, and everything else, and then renting out. I mean, I had a really interesting conversation with Elaine Pinhall on the previous podcast, which is going to be there's going to be a link to it somewhere down here. Very good thing on sell high, sell fast, about staging the property. And it's like, by the way, can you show us your book, Nicole? Because just so that people know what bricking it, yeah. And that book is primarily about from stay-at-home mom to millions in property. Like it.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. Over
Yeah,
how
so it
long?
was written in 2000, at the end of 2000, and it was written at the end of 2016 and published in the middle of 2017. So yeah, it's still relevant, I think.
It's still relevant because I think what you do is you take some basics about remortgaging, which I think a lot of people should be thinking about now, like remortgaging, going through the stuff here. So I think that maybe you can do an addendum online or something else and help us help everyone on it, because I think like having an online part of it, Nicole. I don't know. Do you have a website? Where
I
should
do.
people follow you? Is it on LinkedIn or Instagram, or where should people follow you?
Yeah, I'm most active on LinkedIn and Instagram, probably on Instagram mostly. And then I've got a website, which is nicolebremner.com. But yeah, doing an addendum to the book is a good idea, Rune.
No, I mean, it's like I'd love to see it, because it's like I know that it's so broken down in steps. It's very easy to follow. But then now, is there a change to it? Yes. I mean, doing a second version now is actually maybe the time. So it'd be very interesting to see what you take on it now. And then it's a decade on, right?
Yeah.
So sorry
Well,
for
I've
sorry for
started
giving you the
writing
word,
my next
Nicole.
book actually.
Yeah,
Well, I've written two books. I've written one all about marketing,
yeah.
called Prolific Not Perfect, but I've not published that yet, just because things keep changing in marketing. So I will have to just complete that manuscript and get it done. But the other one I was going to write as a follow up to this
Mm,
is called, someone suggested Bricked It. and it was going to be how to lose millions in property.
Yeah.
And again, it was going to be a little bit about my story, but then also an update to this, and just talk about yeah, how things have changed and riding out the cycles.
Look, Nicole, I think the world popularizes success, right? It's like it's very clear that it popularizes success. Like, oh, I'm a property millionaire or billionaire, and then I become a president, right? Turns out it wasn't quite the billions, but that's a different story, right? I don't want to go into politics, but it's like that's what people do. I remember Rachel Elnor writing the book like Business Nightmares, and it's actually one of the best books I've read about business because it shows like, oh, when the creditors come in, when this stuff happens, because there is no success that's just straight J curve up there. There is no success that is there, right? So I think as I said, some of your nightmares about what goes through in this stuff here is probably more helpful to a lot of people because I know you've had your ups and downs with it. And I also know you landed on your feet and you're fine. Everything is good. But I also know those things are going up and down. No, exactly. I mean, and I think that story is a very interesting story to tell. But I also think it's like do's and don'ts. We can never write that story goes up and down. I mean, even look at Steve Jobs and how many ups and downs, and the company was almost bankrupt before this stuff here. So there's so much in that, and I think that the failures is what we learn from. So it's like
Absolutely.
building failures is not a bad is not a bad thing to learn from. Like how to burn billions. I know some of my competitors can write very good books about how to spend 40 million in marketing and never get a customer. That's another good book that I'm not going to write because I didn't manage to do the same. But Nicole, I was like on those failures. I mean, like let's take one, the final one, and then we'll wrap it up. But it's like that. What's the number one? Not to take it slow. So you think it was your ambition that was at that stage that was your ambition that maybe led to some of the stuff where as you didn't end up with as much return as you would have if you'd gone out earlier, or what do you think when you think about it, what was the worst, what was the best
Yeah, I think
outcome? Yeah.
the I think just to finish off on what I think is probably the most recent failure and a warning to people, because again, it's like, who do you want to be? Who do you want to teach you how to sail? Someone who's never gone through a storm, or someone who's gone through a storm? And I think that this is, we learn so much more from people who have either failed or come close to complete failure or whatever it might be than from success. Failure just teaches us. It gives us a dose of reality. It gives us a dose of humility. So I think that there's, like you say, we should listen more to people who have failed and rebounded from that than people who are perhaps just waving the flag, going, "Yeah, I'm so successful. Look how great I am." So I I think probably my most, it's going back to taking on too much and wanting to grow too fast. And I think we all get caught up in this world where we're viewed as successful, and we get caught up in the emotions and the fanfare around the people saying how successful we are, that we it, it's very difficult to separate the hype from reality, even when it's about yourself, I think. So I think for me, we just took on far too many projects and did not have the systems in place, for very many reasons. We didn't have the development company in place that could deal with the number of projects when we really did think that we did at the time. I honestly believe that we had the right things in place. In hindsight, I don't think we did. And this again comes down to just taking things a bit slower. And it's better to invest your money and come out with a 10-15% return than invest it and come out with a 50% haircut on your money. Just take it slow and take it one project at a time. Celebrate the win on the project, go to your next one, and just do it really, really slowly. And like you say, don't chase this J curve, just chase the slow and steady increases. I think that would be my
I mean, it
advice.
depends on your ability and your willingness to take risk, right? Because there was still a lot of people who want to take the J curve, especially on property, that will still do this stuff. You're like, I'm going to get a deal. I'm going to go on the auction. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to buy this and this and this and this and this. And then suddenly you have 16 unfinished properties and something goes wrong in one of them and that costs more than the whole lot of it.
They're gamblers.
You know,
You look at the mindset of a property developer, it's the same as a gambler. They're always glass half full. Their best case is really their unicorn case.
yeah.
Their worst case should be their best case. And they have got this overly optimistic view of what's going to happen. They never factor in things. Of course, we could never factor in a pandemic. No one's been able to factor that in. But it's about stress testing every single eventuality and seeing having a really realistic view of what could happen, not just, this looks fantastic, I'm going to do all these things and I'm going to have all these properties and I'm going to post about them all over Instagram and everyone's going to think I'm great. It's not about that. It's about ultimately how much money that you bank in your bank account and what you've got to show for it at the end of your time.
I was on a very interesting podcast. On that note, I was on a very interesting podcast recently, which was my worst investment as well, and it was the same revelation for me. Is like, okay, I know why once in a while I lose money. We all know that if you follow Ray Dalio's, it's actually managing your risks is actually more profitable than the J curve growth. Right. So when you really go through that mentality of it, you realize that it's the incremental growth that actually makes you much more wealthy and this stuff here. And then comes the second part, which is what I'm a huge fan of, is like really define what success is. Because success is not only a financial gain. Success is also, having a good relationship with the suppliers, having a good
Mhm.
relationship with the guys who do it, doing homes you're proud of, right? That's what my definition of that one is. So it really comes down to that. But Nicole, now, so what are you moving on to? I mean, it's like, are you still doing property? What's next? I mean, you want to write 2 new books, one on marketing and the other. What's next,
And
Nicole?
now an addendum. Now you've given me a good idea. What am I doing now?
Just a brief
So I
PDF for people like me who can just say like, okay, yeah, well, second thought, is like hindsight is the best. Yeah.
writing it down right now. Yeah, so what I'm doing right now is I am still working on the properties. As I said, we've got around 100 and something units that we're selling out. So I'm still very active
You're
on
not
the
out.
property side.
You're not out. It's not. You're not. You maybe have had a punch. You're not out. You're in property. It's like,
I'm
sorry,
still a
anything more
property
than three, and
investor.
you're in property. That's in your blood. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'm working on another potential site with a fantastic family office in London as well. So working on that, and then I've really enjoyed the other investments that I've made. So things like Bamboo Auctions, Terrible Merch, and Eda Active. So looking at investing a bit more time into these investments that I've made, especially Eda Active, looking at perhaps pivoting that a bit now that the market's changed as well. And then my podcast, I'm really enjoying my podcast as well. So I want to invest a bit more time into that as well. And then, yeah, I think I've got time for one more thing in my life. So I'm just looking at what that one more thing is.
Yeah, just 100 properties and a couple of other things and then a few other things. I mean, as a serial entrepreneur and running multiple services, I can understand you. The links of what Nicole is talking about is going to be down here below somewhere on the page. We'll make sure that you can get those in case you didn't catch what the names was. And then, I mean, do go and follow Nicole. I think she's got a lot of really great content. It's been such a pleasure to have you on, Nicole. And it's been such a pleasure to talk to you again about this. They'll follow you on your podcast and so forth. And I look forward to having a follow up. And I hope to be able to post some of the videos of what before and afters and some of the works that we're doing with you and so forth. So it's going to be very interesting to see. I mean, I do think you classify into the Hall of Fame of what we call property heroes. And I do think, it's like you said, 100 plus properties, I don't know how many in total you've actually done and how much the value of it, but it don't count.
No,
It's
lots.
mind blowing when you think about this stuff here. So I think it's been a real pleasure to talk about you. And hear this stuff here. I can't wait to read the second part of the book, which is like hindsight is the 2020 or whatever you're going to call it. I can't wait to read this stuff because I know that when we were talking about it, we were sharing things about the news says this, but this is what's actually happening. And it seems to me like it's PR for the sake of PR. It's like this is growing for the sake of it, but also, I mean, again, we're confirming this stuff is like that. We are seeing an urbanization of society. We are seeing a move out from central. We are seeing a change in what it is. I mean, I know that, for example, Grayson Road, there's 300 empty flats right now, which used to be continuously full of solicitors and barristers who were always living there. It's empty now and they're trying to rent that out and so forth, and it's not there. So there are these changes. Um, but Nicole, you've sailed. You do a lot of other things in this stuff here. If there's one little thing, like as a goodbye thing on the finishing on the podcast, when those days get dark, when those days get dark, when that sale or isn't going through, when it's hard, what do you do yourself? What is it? What picks you up again? Where do you go to pick yourself up again and say like, I got to get on with it and I got to get another 100 properties, or what's your motivation there?
Oh, I think it's thinking back to when I was a young girl, when I was maybe 16 to 25, and I was just burning with ambition and hope and optimism. And it's about going back to that. And yeah, there's been some really, really dark times and times that are and still are that are really, really difficult. And by going back to that younger me and trying to tap into that complete naive optimism and expectation about how great life was going to be, that really does help me. And then seeing that naive optimism in my children and that beautiful ability that they have to think that life's just going to hand them everything, I think that's really beautiful to tap into.
Mm. But you're still in property. You're still in there. You probably got smarter on it. Your investments are probably better. They might not be those J curve, 10x, 100x, but they're still in there. You're still alive, and you're doing fine with it. And you're probably going to make a lot better investments on it. So I think on the positive stuff is like, even looking back on that, I think all of us as entrepreneurs and everything else, we do have those journeys of when do you take the step, when do you take the risk. So I think like, thank you very much for also sharing a little bit about that, because I do think it's an important lesson to do it. And I do think in property, especially, there will be those times. And having
Yeah.
good suppliers, having good people to talk to and understanding it is like, it's important. It's like, but you're still in it, and you're not just still in it. I mean, sorry, but 100 properties is not a small little portfolio. So, Nicole, thank you so much for appearing here. I
Thank
can't
you.
wait to read at least the PDF of the addendum of it, of like how you're going to come through the next one. I'm sure you've got some great insights. So links will be down below, guys. With all these things, we'll also see Nicole. Hopefully, you'll share some nice photos of property you have done. Give us an inspiration. Can't wait to see that. Thank you so much for appearing. And
Thank you, Rune. And thanks for all your words of support over the last few months as well. I've enjoyed our little exchanges.